Mark Harrington stood in the center of the grand hall, looking out at the vast cityscape beyond the glass walls of the Lorthian palace. The towering spires of crystal and metal reached toward the sky, reflecting the light of a twin sunset. This was a far cry from Earth, from everything he knew. He had been sent here as part of an interplanetary peace mission, representing humanity to the great Lorthian Empire. The stakes were high. Peace between the human colonies and the Lorthian species was fragile, and Mark knew this would be one of the most important meetings of his life. Mark was tall, with sharp features and a calm, calculating demeanor. He had trained his entire life for moments like this, mastering diplomacy, rhetoric, and negotiation. He knew how to handle hostile governments, political tensions, and most importantly, how to maintain control of his emotions. That's what they had taught him. Always keep calm, never let them see you sweat. He had learned to be patient, to wait for the right moment to speak, and to never react impulsively. As he waited in the palace's grand lobby, a servant, dressed in the traditional golden attire of the Lorthian court, approached him. She led him down a long corridor to a large, ornate chamber. Inside, seated at the far end of the room, was Princess Liara, the 22-year-old heir to the throne of the Lorthian Empire. Liara was known across the galaxy for her beauty, intelligence, and sharp wit. She was a figure both admired and feared. Her youthful appearance, with long silver hair that cascaded around her shoulders like a waterfall of light, made her look angelic. But her eyes, bright and penetrating, betrayed a sharp mind and a fiery personality. She had a reputation for teasing her guests, testing them with her intelligence and challenging their boundaries. She was always 2 steps ahead, always in control. Mark had heard the rumors. He had been briefed about her playful nature and the way she liked to push people to their limits, but he wasn't worried. He had dealt with many powerful figures in his time. None had ever managed to get under his skin. This was just another diplomatic mission. He could handle it. The servant stepped aside and Mark approached Princess Liara. She rose from her seat with a graceful movement, her robe of silver and midnight blue flowing behind her. The room seemed to shimmer with her presence. She smiled, but there was a mischievous glint in her eyes. "Welcome, human," she said, her voice light and musical. "I've heard much about your species. Tell me, what makes you so special?" Mark bowed slightly, his posture perfect. "I represent Earth and its people, Your Highness. We seek peace and mutual understanding. We hope to foster a stronger relationship between our worlds." Liara's smile widened as she leaned forward, her eyes studying him intently. "Peace, How quaint. And what makes you believe your kind can bring peace? After all, you are quite primitive compared to us." Mark's eyes didn't waver. "Every species has its strengths. We believe in cooperation, Your Highness. We seek to build a future together." Liara chuckled softly, the sound like a gentle wind through the trees. "How noble," she said, her voice laced with a teasing tone. "But I must ask, do you truly believe your species can match the might and intellect of the Lorthians? After all, we have evolved far beyond what you can imagine." Mark's gaze remained steady. "I don't seek to compare, only to understand." The princess seemed amused by his answer, her lips curling into a smirk. She leaned back in her seat, crossing her arms as if to study him like a specimen. "Tell me, human, how do you handle the frustrations of your kind? Your emotions, your limitations?" "It must be so difficult, yes." Mark remained silent for a moment, considering his response. He had been trained to stay calm, to never reveal too much. "We learn to control them," he said finally. "It's not easy, but it is part of who we are." Liara laughed again, the sound echoing through the chamber. "Control? I suppose that explains the lack of excitement in your eyes. You are so reserved, so restrained." She tilted her head, her silver hair catching the light. "You must feel stifled, never letting your emotions run free." Mark didn't respond, maintaining his composed silence. He knew exactly what she was doing. It was clear that she was trying to provoke him to see if she could make him react. She had done this to many others, testing their patience, teasing them with her sharp tongue, seeing who would break. But Mark wasn't like the others. He had been trained to resist. Nothing would make him lose his composure. Liara leaned forward again, her eyes narrowing in amusement. "You know, you are far too serious for my liking. I find it hard to believe that a species so young could produce someone so dull." She paused, letting the words linger in the air like a challenge. "Don't you ever feel the need to just let go, to feel something?" Mark stood still, his gaze unwavering. He had seen this game before, but it wasn't his game to play. He had learned long ago that engaging in such challenges only led to unnecessary conflict. He wasn't here to fight. He wasn't here to prove himself. He was here for peace, for understanding. The princess smiled again, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was a smile that came with the realization that Mark wasn't playing by her rules. "You're an interesting one," she said softly, almost to herself. "I wonder how long you can keep up this silence." Mark's lips tightened, but he didn't answer. The princess was clearly fascinated by him, but she had underestimated him. He wasn't here to entertain her. He wasn't here to win her approval. He was here to secure a future for humanity. Nothing more. Liara stood up suddenly, walking toward him with a fluid, graceful movement. She was barely an arm's length away when she stopped, her eyes gleaming with playful challenge. "I wonder, human," she said, her voice low, "how you'll respond when I truly push you. Will you still be so silent then?" Mark didn't flinch. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He simply looked into her eyes, unfazed by her closeness or her challenge. The silence between them hung heavy, but Mark remained resolute. "Perhaps," he said finally, "I've already given you my answer." Liara blinked, clearly taken aback by his response. She had expected some form of retaliation, some attempt to match her wit, her intellect, or her power. But instead, she was met with nothing but silence, a silence that spoke volumes. Mark had not given in to her game, had not shown the reaction she sought. And in that silence he had won. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Liara studied him, her mind racing to understand this human who refused to be moved, who refused to bend under her teasing and her challenge. Mark, on the other hand, stood motionless, his expression a mask of calm control. It was then that Mark turned and began to walk away. He wasn't angry, he wasn't frustrated, he was simply leaving. The peace mission wasn't about personal battles or proving who was stronger or smarter. It was about something far more important. And with that, he exited the room, leaving the princess alone with her thoughts. The next day, Mark was summoned to another formal event at the Lorthian Palace. A grand banquet was planned to celebrate the successful completion of the first phase of peace talks between the humans and the Lorthians. Mark knew that his work was far from over, but today was supposed to be a day of celebration, a time for the two species to enjoy their accomplishments together. As Mark entered the grand hall, he was met with a flurry of activity. Lorthian dignitaries and their guests, including representatives from many alien species, were gathered in the opulent room. The palace's vast windows allowed the soft purple light of the twin moons to flood the room, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. Mark couldn't help but marvel at the beauty of the place, but his thoughts quickly returned to the task at hand. He had one job here, to ensure the peace between the two worlds. And while the Lorthians were undeniably impressive, Mark couldn't afford to be distracted by their grandeur. He had a mission, and that mission required focus. As he made his way through the crowd, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries with various dignitaries, Mark's thoughts lingered on the previous day's encounter with Princess Liara. Her words and her behavior had left a mark on him. He had never encountered anyone quite like her before. Most diplomats would have found her teasing an opportunity to engage and counter, but Mark had chosen silence instead. It hadn't been easy. The princess had tested him, probing his emotions with every word. But Mark had stayed calm. His training had prepared him for moments like these. He had learned that the greatest strength lay in remaining composed, in never allowing another to see your true emotions. In that silence, Mark had hoped to communicate something more powerful than words, something beyond the need to prove himself. But he wasn't sure if Liara had understood that. His thoughts were interrupted when he saw her across the room. Princess Liara stood by the grand fireplace, laughing with a small group of guests. Her presence commanded attention without her even trying. People were drawn to her, mesmerized by her charisma. She had that effect on others, a magnetic charm, a confidence that radiated from her like a beacon. Mark studied her from a distance, noting how her eyes sparkled with amusement as she effortlessly navigated through the conversation. He had to admit there was something captivating about her. Despite her teasing and her games, there was a sharpness to her mind that demanded respect. But Mark wasn't here to admire her. He wasn't here to be part of her games. He was here on a mission, and nothing, no matter how captivating, would change that. Liara's gaze shifted, and for a brief moment their eyes met across the room. The princess's smile faded slightly, as if she recognized him immediately. She excused herself from the group and made her way toward him, her movements graceful and confident. "Human," she said with a playful smile as she reached his side. "I thought I'd find you here. You always seem to be so serious." Mark gave her a polite nod. "Your Highness." Liara's eyes twinkled with mischief. "I must admit I find your silence intriguing. I've never met anyone who can stand up to my teasing without batting an eye. You are a curious specimen, Mark Harrington." Mark remained calm, his expression neutral. "I'm here to ensure that we move forward together, Princess. Teasing is not part of the agreement." Her smile widened, clearly entertained. "You know, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday," she said. "I'm still trying to figure you out. You must have some hidden emotion, some reaction. Why do you refuse to show them?" Mark paused, choosing his words carefully. "There are many ways to communicate, Your Highness. Silence can be just as powerful as words." Liara raised an eyebrow. "Silence, How very human of you, but you cannot truly be silent, can you? I know that beneath your calm exterior there must be something." Mark met her gaze. "I am exactly what I appear to be." For a moment, Liara said nothing. Her eyes searched his face, as if looking for a crack in the facade, something that would give her a hint of who he really was. But there was nothing. Nothing but the calm, steady gaze of a man who refused to be provoked. "I must say," Liara finally said, her tone softening slightly, "you are unlike anyone I have met, your species. You hide so much beneath the surface. How do you live like this, holding everything inside?" Mark didn't respond right away. He could feel her trying to unravel him, trying to get him to open up, to be something other than what he was. But he wasn't interested in playing her game. He wasn't here to explain himself, to justify his actions. He was here to negotiate peace. "I live the way I must," Mark said finally. "We all make choices, Your Highness. Some of us choose to control our emotions. Others choose to let them run wild." Liara seemed intrigued by his words, her expression shifting as if she were mulling over his response. "I can see why they sent you for this mission. You are composed, controlled. You never let your guard down." Mark nodded. "That's what I was trained to do, to stay focused no matter the circumstances." Liara tilted her head, studying him with a mixture of curiosity and admiration. "You know, I've always wondered how the humans manage to stay so focused. You're such a young species, so full of potential, yet you seem to hold yourselves back. What is it that makes you so guarded?" Mark paused. "Perhaps it's because we've seen the consequences of giving in to our emotions. Our history has taught us that unchecked emotion can lead to destruction." Liara's expression softened. "I see, you fear your own feelings." Mark shook his head. "Not fear. Respect." Liara was quiet for a moment, contemplating his words. She had heard many different perspectives on humanity, but Mark's seemed different. He wasn't speaking from a place of arrogance or superiority. He wasn't trying to impress her or win her approval. He simply stated the truth, and that intrigued her. "Well," she said after a long pause, "I suppose there's much to learn from each other. Perhaps we'll never fully understand one another, but we can still find common ground." Mark nodded, a small but genuine smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "That's the hope." The conversation shifted as a servant approached with a tray of drinks, and Liara excused herself to join the other guests. As she walked away, Mark felt a shift in the air around him. It wasn't much, but there was something different about her now. Something had changed. Whether it was because of their exchange or something else entirely, Mark couldn't say for certain. But he had the feeling that Liara was beginning to see him in a different light. He wasn't just another human, another diplomat to be tested and teased. He was something more, something she couldn't quite figure out. As the banquet continued into the evening, Mark kept his distance from the princess, focusing instead on the diplomatic discussions at hand. But his mind wandered back to Liara. He couldn't deny that she was captivating, that there was a fire in her that was hard to ignore. But he couldn't afford to let that distract him. The peace talks were the priority, and he wouldn't let anything stand in the way of their success. Yet, as the night wore on, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that his encounter with Liara had only just begun. There was more to her than he had first realized, and though he had kept his composure, he couldn't help but wonder what she would do next. Would she continue to test him, or would she respect the silence he had given her? Only time would tell.